Good morning and welcome to Andre the Podcast. I'm Andre Lacey, and today we're diving into a story that sits at the intersection of public safety, law, local government, and community trust. We're talking about the deployment of the Tennessee National Guard in Memphis and a court ruling that has temporarily halted it. Why does this matter? Because at the heart of it is a question of power. Who gets to send military forces into our streets and under what authority? Let's dive into it right now. Here's some context and background on this developing story. Memphis has been grappling with serious violent crime issues for years. Earlier this fall, the federal government joined with the state and local officials to launch the Memphis Safe Task Force, sending hundreds of law enforcement officers and National Guard troops into the city to help restore order. Now, Governor Bill Lee authorized the Guard's deployment under state authority, supported by federal memorandum from President Donald Trump. The idea was to bring overwhelming resources to a city under pressure, but lawsuits followed. A group of local and state officials, including Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris, filed a suit arguing that the governor lacked the legal basis to deploy the Guard in this way. They said under Tennessee law, the Guard can only be called up under narrow conditions, including through rebellion, invasion, or when the legislature declares a public safety emergency. Also, a local government's request is often required. The plaintiffs say none of these boxes were checked. So you might be wondering, what does this mean and what has happened so far? That's the big question. Well, let's take you there. On Monday, November 17th, Chancellor Patricia Head Moskow of the Davidson County Chancery Court issued an injunction temporarily blocking further deployment of the National Guard from Tennessee to Memphis. She found the plaintiffs had shown a likelihood of success on the merits of their argument, and that the governor's actions probably violated the state's military code. Because there was no grave emergency, no local request, and the legislature had not acted. That being said, the injunction will not take effect immediately. The state has 5 business days to seek permission to appeal, and in the meantime, the Guard will stay in place while the legal process plays out. Now, the state says that they will appeal and that they maintain the governor had authority under Title 32 and that the deployment is critical for public safety. Now, you might ask, what does this mean? Why does this matter? There are multiple layers to dive into here. Let's dive into them right now. Legally, this ruling reinforces that executive power, even in public safety crisis, is subject to constraints. The judge's line, the power committed to the governor, is not unfettered, is something to think about. Public safety-wise, supporters say Memphis needed this support. Hundreds of arrests have been made, and that the Guard boots might mean deterrence. Critics argue that this risk militarizing local law enforcement and undermining trust, as well as operating outside democratic oversight. Culturally and socially, consider the community impact. Memphis is a majority Black city and has faced decades of policing and trust issues. A visible National Guard presence while walking through the streets of Memphis triggers questions such as, are we safe or are we being watched? Another question that might be asked is this a partnership or a show of force? Let's continue. Politically, the case reveals the tension between local governments wanting autonomy, state governments asserting control, and federal involvement pressing through. the outcome could ripple far beyond Memphis, potentially changing how National Guard deployments are governed in other states and cities. Something to think about. Now let's take a look at some of the voices and reactions to what's going on, because there's a lot to think about. Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris said the ruling is a positive step towards ensuring the rule of law applies to everyone, including everyday Tennesseans and even the governor. Meanwhile, the state responded also saying they believe the deployment is lawful and necessary, and that the court is misreading the law. However, residents in Memphis have mixed feelings. Some feel safer with extra patrols, while others worry this is a signal that the state doesn't trust them. And that adds a new layer of tension. What does that tension mean, really? Here's an example that many have thought about, and that has come up in a recent article. For example, you might imagine, or you can imagine, a mother walking home after dark, let's say after work, for example, and being glad that the guard is present as a measure of safety. Again, remembering that the guard does not have the authority to arrest or doesn't have the ability to carry weapons, including guns and other things. They are typically with police officers, Memphis police officers. And another example would be another resident thinking, who's watching me now? And having that uncomfortable feeling of uncertainty of having their steps watched every time they move around the city. Something to think about, huh? Keep thinking about it and let us know what you think about it on our handles on social media at AndreThePodcast. We look forward to hearing from you. Now, let's look at this through a faith and culture lens. You might ask, what does it say when a community relies on military force to maintain order? And how do spiritual values of community, dignity, and justice intersect with state and security strategies? Think about that for a second. It's something that many people are talking about and thinking about. Now, let's keep going, because there is a lot to think about. As we watch and wait for what's next and what to look out for, here are the next steps. The state has 5 business days to appeal, and they say they are. If they succeed, the Guard's presence may continue and expand. There have been reports about the Guard expanding and even more Guard members coming to the city. And from our reporting, that report is accurate. But if they don't succeed, they may be required to leave, changing the nature of the task force significantly. It is also important to watch out for this. If the legislature weighs in, will they? We'll find out. Will local governments push back? Local governments here are pushing back. Could that happen in other cities and states? We'll see. Will other cities, as I just mentioned, will they be using the ruling as a precedent to change and challenge state and federal deployments? That's something you have to watch out for, and it's something definitely worth thinking about. And how could this ruling impact the laws here in Memphis? That's another thing that people are talking about. It's a lot to think about, and we have differing opinions on the matter. Some say they should remain here because they're needed, and others clearly aren't in favor of it. We shall see what happens in this interesting court proceeding. Now, for Memphis, this moment is pivotal. The city must balance immediate crime-fighting needs with long-term trust and civic partnership. Residents and native Memphians are arguing that there is a lack of trust with the National Guard being here in the city of Memphis, and that it makes it difficult for them to trust and to even understand why they are here. Others also argue that the National Guard being here is a waste of time. Earlier this afternoon, prior to the taping of this show, there was a story about people who are saying that they feel that their tax dollars are being wasted here in Memphis on the National Guard, who really only stay in specific areas and kind of walk around. Again, they don't have any authority to arrest or do any other things here while they're in the city of Memphis. And so there's just been an argument of why they're needed and why not invest the money into other specific resources, including with mental health and expanding reach with the Memphis Police Department and going after crime. We'll give you another example. This past Monday, earlier this week, there was a shooting at the Wolf Chase Galleria. Now, the shooting was not, and I have to say this clearly, in case you haven't heard the story, which I would think all Memphians have, but for those who are outside of Memphis, the shooting was not to target anybody. I won't say they weren't there to target anyone, but they were there to target a specific person. It wasn't a mass shooting, is what I was trying to say. It wasn't a mass shooting, but the person was quickly arrested and identified. But it did leave many on guard. As we tape this show on a Tuesday afternoon, it left many on guard Tuesday once the mall reopened about safety and what happens next. And it's something to think about. So, as a Memphian, what are you looking for? We want to hear from you here on Andre the Podcast. So again, reach out to us. We want to hear from you. We're at Andre the Podcast everywhere you follow us on social media. And with that, the question also becomes, can enforcement and justice go hand in hand, or do we risk substituting force for community? Again, Monday's incident proved that it's hard to determine, really. Although the Memphis Safe Task Force was involved in quickly finding, arresting, and identifying the suspect, there are still questions about why not invest in other resources, maybe as well or altogether, and dissolve the Memphis Safe Task Force. It's a very complex and tricky situation, and I think many people are concerned about what this will do for the city of Memphis and our tax dollars as well. Why not invest in other things that could have a lasting impact? We'll keep watching, and you stay with us as we continue to bring you coverage on this developing story. As we close out, this is an ongoing story that we're following, and we hope you continue to follow with us, about really bringing more troops to the streets. Again, that's a possibility. We've already had stories about it. Could more come? Could they stay here longer? There have been reports that they could stay here for a year or maybe more. We'll find out. It's about governance. It's about law, democracy, and the community's voice. It's also a reminder that even in the most urgent of times, the rule of law matters. And because it's really a challenging situation, when it's set aside, trust and legitimacy can also quickly follow behind it. This situation is proving how tricky it is. Some people really don't trust in what's going on in the process right now, but others say that this isn't a problem and that people are looking too deep into it. But we'll find out. In closing, I want to say thank you for listening and tuning into today's Andre the Podcast. If this episode left you informed and wanting to know more, please like and share with someone you know in Memphis or someone interested in how community, culture, and law intersect. Until next time, again, thanks for being with us. Stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, it is a must that we protect truth and build culture together. I'm Andre Lacey. Be blessed and stay encouraged, and we'll see you next time.